All right, hello. I just want to say for the record, I did not choose that walk-on music. Just kidding, just kidding. Well, actually, I'm not kidding. Okay. Just to lighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to introduce the panelists and we're going to get right into it. But before I do that, I just want to start by saying how tremendously honored I am to be asked to moderate this panel. I think we have to understand in these times that our struggles are intrinsically and inherently linked, and we have to stand up for each other, and that every child deserves to see themselves in the stories that are told, and every child deserves to be seen by others as well. And these fellow panelists have all been tremendous advocates of the right for us to be seen, to be read, and to read. So I'm going to start on my left, Brian K. Bond. He became the executive director of PFLAG National in 2019, leading the organization through major growth and rising anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment. Under his leadership, PFLAG took unprecedented legal action, including suing Texas over investigations. Yes. We can clap for that. I didn't finish the sentence, but just the suing Texas was all we needed to know. Suing Texas over investigations into families of transgender children, and filing PFLAG v. Trump to challenge anti-trans healthcare policies, really essential legal work. We can clap for Brian. Casey McQuiston, who is a prolific author. If you go to the book fair, you'll see all of the many amazing books that they have written. And Casey is the New York Times bestselling author known for queer romantic comedies like Red, White, and Royal Blue. I know y'all know that one. One Last Stop, and I Kissed Charles Wheeler. Yeah, you got it. Okay. Originally from Louisiana, they studied journalism at LSU, and I didn't know that. And later moved to New York City. Their work blends heartfelt romance with sharp wit and vibrant characters. Casey identifies as queer and non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. And last but not least, here in the center is Sam Helmick. Sam is also from Iowa. We bonded, we're both from Iowa. We'll tell you our secret recipe for Iowa cuisine maybe later at the end of the talk. Sam is president of the American Library Association. We should just applaud for that. And also community and access services coordinator at the Iowa City Public Library. With a background in human services and library science, they have served as president of the Iowa Library Association and on key ALA committees. Sam is a strong advocate against censorship and for library funding, focusing on community building, advocacy, storytelling, and education. And their leadership centers on promoting access, equity, and inclusive storytelling. And just to say, as a personal tribute, are there librarians in this room today? Truly, librarians and libraries saved me as a young Black girl growing up in Waterloo, Iowa. I know how important it is to see yourself on the shelf and have librarians who will direct you in your process of discovery. So thank you for the work you do, and just thank you to librarians. I know it has been hard these last few years, and you all do not deserve that because you are a lifeline for so many people, children and adults across communities. So with that said, I'm going to start with you, Sam. As a librarian who leads the American Library Association, I want you to help us set the stage for this conversation today. Talk to us about what you're seeing on the ground, how book bans are playing out in schools and libraries, and let's just acknowledge how wild it is that folks are trying to ban books from libraries, literally from places that are designed to give us access to books and information. So what are you seeing, and from the ALA's perspective, about the current landscape and the book challenges?
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciated that we bonded over those Iowa recipes. It is a delight to be in community with you all, and If I were to set the stage, I think it's important to think about a few historical markers at this time. The first being that the American Library Association is about to be 150 years old, so the hardest part of my presidency is saying sesquicentennial in public. And our nation is about to be 250 years old. And some of the things that I think we all can agree on, the common ground of our history that we all can appeal to, is that our founders, when they said they wanted to create a more perfect union, clearly not perfect, but trying to get more perfection over time, was that we were going to have access to information, because that is access to opportunity and connection. This is why we see folks like Franklin and Jefferson and Madison heavily involving themselves in the proliferation of library services. Fortunately, they've been much evolved over time, but it is part of the American story. And so I think what's happening right now is we're forgetting that story. We're forgetting the fact that access to information has always been access to opportunity. And if this is the land of opportunity, then libraries can't just be an opinion. They have to be a value that we invest in, with robust policy that supports our library workers, our teachers, our students, our public, but then also funding, because funding is an intellectual freedom issue too. Unfortunately, we've seen this dark wave over, I'd say, probably the past half decade. It's growing closer to a decade now, where we are not trusting ourselves. We are not trusting our neighbors, our teachers, our school boards, our librarians to do the good work that our nation was founded on. And so pernicious legislation is being written both at the national and the local level to essentially remove that trust in ourselves. And I think to paint one of the most trusted faces of government terribly, because you can't dismantle publicly funded institutions of opportunity and hope when librarians are so popular and they help you support your learning and recreational goals. And so I think a castigation of this profession, I think a misunderstanding of how central libraries are to our democracy, and then just this unmitigated wave of bill after bill to fatigue people and to try to create a national chilling effect is taking shape. And if I were going to isolate it into one sentence, I guess I would say we're at a precipice. We're either going to be a nation that teaches our children what to think or how to think. And censorship is a hammer that looks for a nail. So if we let it through the door without fighting back, it will never stop swinging.
So Casey, you have been impacted personally by the bans. Can you talk a little bit about when did you first become aware that your books were being banned or challenged, and why book bans matter, particularly when it comes to young people being affected and being able to see themselves in the stories that are told?
Yeah, I mean, so the first time I became aware of a challenge to one of my books was when I found out that my first book, Red, White, and Royal Blue, was under investigation for obscenity by the state of Oklahoma. Shout out Oklahoma. And since then, I've, I keep up with the PEN America reports as much as I can, which I think we all should be doing, because I think it's always really helpful to know which books are most at risk, especially for educators out there to be prepared to, argue for why they should be included in curriculums. But for me, I'm challenged and banned in a lot of states. I think there's 23 states total that are working on bans and challenges, but for me, mostly it's Tennessee, Texas, and Florida. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. The first thing I think of as an author is about all of the working authors who depend on these big buys from schools and libraries to make a living. And they're only able to do the work that they do because educators and librarians are placing these orders for YA and middle grade books. And so I think about those people, and then of course I think about, Melinda Lowe put this amazingly recently. She had the 4th most challenged book of the US last year, last night at the Telegraph Club. And she really brought us all into this conversation of how this is also a First Amendment issue. She looped it back to this comes into what happened at Columbia with Mahmoud Khalil. This comes into, our right to political protest being under threat. It's all a battleground to see how far they can get in legislating marginalized people out of public life and then eventually out of existence, And so it's not simply a matter of, oh, it's a badge of honor to get your book banned. I think we can view it that way, but it's so much more complex than that. And for me, of course, like growing up in the Deep South and coming out and you know, wanting to be a queer author and representing, you know, queerness and transness and romance, it hits you kind of in this very soft part of your heart too, where it reminds you what it felt like to be rejected. And especially these red states, these are the states that have kids that deeply need to see themselves reflected in joyful stories and romance and YA and middle grade and adventure stories. You know, these are the books that are getting banned. And these are the kids that deeply need to see themselves, most of all because they're the most isolated in the states that they live in. And so I think of them deeply, and I think about, you know, I was lucky enough to get to host the Teen Reads, the National Book Awards this year, and some incredible authors who were nominated, and we had 1,000 students from around New York City boroughs coming out, and these kids were so stoked because these authors looked like them. These authors had stories that they related to that were mirrors to them. These kids were like screaming like they were at a football game. They were so excited, and we are being told that kids don't care about books like that anymore, but these kids care so much when it's something that means something to them. And it just breaks my heart to think about separating them from that. So that's my emotional take on it too.
I mean, I appreciate your answer, and I really appreciate you pointing out that, and I know some authors do take it as a point of pride, and there's moments I have felt that too, like I have great enemies. But it is so essential because it's very damaging to also be the target of those bans, right? Like what it says about you, that there's something wrong with you or the history of your people, that your books have to be removed, or books about your experience. And I think having like the gravitas around what this really means to students and communities is really important. Brian, you know, if you look at, so PEN America is tracking the bans, and a lot of times we're like, we've never lived through times like this, but we actually are seeing an unprecedented level of book bans across the country. And the two types of books that are most banned are books about the Black American experience, or books that talk about racism, and of course books about the LGBTQ plus community. So I'd like you to first answer, I understand, it seems pretty clear why they are trying to ban books about the Black American experience, because they find it embarrassing, right? They find that it really challenges the mythology of America, and as they explicitly tell you, makes some white Americans feel guilty, or they pretend that they fear it's going to make white Americans feel guilty. But I'd like you to tell us explicitly, why are we seeing the challenges of books about the queer experience in America? So start with that, and then I'll ask my follow-up question. But why are these books specifically being challenged?
First of all, hey everyone, Brian Bond again, pronouns he, him. I do want to thank South by Southwest for having us here, and I want to thank this incredible panel for being here. It's an honor to be with them. I want to thank all the teachers out there, all the educators, all the librarians, all the parents, all the students that are here. We work very closely with ALA, with NEAAFT, because this is real, and it's like, I could give you lots of reasons, but and it's not just the queer community, it is all of us. Anybody that they can make different, anybody they can make other, any way they can go back to their version of Ozzie and Harriet world, and about power, candidly. The attacks right now on, especially the trans community, is horrific, and it's mean-spirited, and it's the tip of the spear of where these folks are headed. I say all that, though I do want to do a little bit of a positive if I can. PFLAG, its first chapter meeting was 53 years ago today. Started by a mom who was a school teacher who had had enough. And today, there are 360 chapters around the country, 21 here in Texas. And we talked about suing the state. The demonization of the queer community, the trans community, especially non-binary individuals in this state, is really about holding power and trying to erase some of the bravest people I know out there.
Okay. Does anyone else want to answer that question before I ask my next question?
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, of
Sorry.
course.
We will collectively get through this. We've seen this show before. Yeah, I'm a person living with HIV. I saw tons of people, friends, die. We came back as a stronger community. There's a reason that for some communities that the church matters. We build community, and we learn, and we grow, and we'll get into the action items later, but it's our time to step up, those that are able to do so right now.
And I appreciate the opportunity to share that positivity too, because I really realize in this moment, I describe the waters, but not the rafts. And we are working with our authors and our publishers and our coalitions of support. And I'm seeing for the first time in my career as a library worker, coalitions that have not only been engaged, but organized and activated. And I can tell you firsthand in every state around this nation, when we show up for libraries, we're winning. So that's also a state of the affairs here.
Mm-hmm. I love being on the panel with positive people because I'm not. So I appreciate that. I do think it's important, though, that we recognize that this is a political project and that the targeting of these two specific groups is intentional. I think it's a way to divide coalitions from each other, to tap into people's emotion, to overcome the rational mind about these things. And that the way powerful people have always come into power is by targeting the most marginalized and scapegoating the most marginalized. They tell us it's about protecting children, but I think about growing up, and when I saw, I was bused to white schools, and the first book I saw in my library with a black girl on it was Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and how powerful it was for me just to see a girl who looked like me. But I never, ever, as a child, saw a book with a gay character. There was never any books with a gay character. And that sends a message to children about their worth and their value and who they are. So I would love, Casey, if you could talk about, the importance of this type of storytelling that you do and what message you would have for young children, or just children, young people, when they erase your story, they're trying to erase you as a person and your right to exist.
It's interesting for me because a lot of the books, first of all, I think we can all agree that a lot of the books that are banned, it's very clear that the people who want to ban them have literally never opened them, even once. And so, to me, my books are not at their core issue books. Like, they are books about love and humor and humanity and like romance and happy endings where the main characters happen to be unapologetically queer, and some of them they're openly trans. They are characters who are living life in just happen to also be these things, and it's intrinsically woven into their characters, but it is also not a book that if you were to open it you would be like, this is wildly explicit. This is not something that is a corruptive influence on a young reader, but what happens when you act like a story of happiness and love for a queer or trans person is inherently explicit, pornographic, or inappropriate for young kids, is you're telling them that who you are is so intrinsically, for lack of a better word, dirty or worth hiding or not fit for public life. And that is so deeply damaging because I grew up, I went to Southern Baptist School for 12 years, like kindergarten through 12th grade. And we all unpack that in our own time. And I think what it would have meant to me to have an example, this is why I wrote my book, I Kishar Wheeler, about a young queer girl who's attending a Southern Christian school and trying to find her way, because there was no window into that or mirror of that when I was growing up for me to even feel less alone, much less accepted and loved and celebrated. And so, what I want to say to those kids is that these people are completely not even just wrong, but they're not even making any point. They're just, it's a scare tactic, it's fear mongering, it's seeing what they can get away with, it's injecting vitriol into the news cycle so that they can then harass authors at their events, you know? It is truly meaningless. And I would hate for any kid to take away this feeling of what I feel sometimes when I hear a new challenge has come up, which is like, I'm really just existing, and that's too much, you know? And I would never want a kid to feel that way. And really, once I get past that initial ouch, then I know it's not real and it's not true. But I wouldn't be able to feel so confident in that if it wasn't for like these coalitions that we're talking about, and if it wasn't for, you know, organizations like, you know, Texas Freedom to Read, Florida Freedom to Read, these parents that are unionizing with each other to back up not just authors but their students. And I think like any kid who really wants to feel accepted and loved, I would encourage them to even just follow those pages on Instagram and see there are so many parents out there. That's what PFLAG's all about, is that there's so many parents out there that will love you even if your parents don't get you, you know. So shout out to PFLAG for healing my inner child.
I do think, you know, shouting out all of the parents and other groups, students who are organizing against this is really important, because the people who are enacting these bans are a tiny minority. They don't, I mean, the polling is clear on this. Most communities don't want this, and actually, most of the parents, they're not parents, actually, right? Most of the political operatives who are initiating these book bans don't even have kids in these schools that they're in, but they've been much, much more organized. And I think that a lot of people in the community did not take seriously how organized these folks have been. So Sam, one of the things that we hear all the time, I certainly hear this, is these aren't actually bans. Like, you can still access the books. You can go to the store and buy the books. Like, it's not a ban. So can you talk to us about why we have to understand that removing books, outlawing books from libraries and from schools is effectively a ban?
Yes, I'm actually going to answer this question by asking you all to do me a favor. Could you just close your eyes for a second? I promise not to peek. Can you remember a story, because you started us off, that captured you or connected you to other people or made you feel seen? Do you remember the first time you found that in a library or a school space? How good does that feel? You can open your eyes, because I'm seeing you all smile. Why would we deprive others of that? Why would we deprive our future of that feeling, right? Because it's as important to have experiences unlike my own on the shelves as much as it is to be seen. And so when we say that these materials can be purchased, what we're insisting on is that we do not want educational and frankly emotional, spiritual sustenance, social sustenance for our folks. What we're saying is that why would you need running water in your community? You can always go buy a bottle at the store. And literature is the exact same way. It's really misdirecting the conversation, which is that everybody has a right to read, every author has a right to be seen and to speak, and that our nation was founded on this structure in order for us to all have access. I think that answer is wrapped up a lot in privilege, it's wrapped up in a lot of consumerism and capitalism, but at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is not take ownership for what they're doing, which is effectively, economically, socially saying that there are certain topics that are verboten, and if you want to explore them, you're going to pay to play. And in the information age, that is categorically unfair. The other thing that I guess I would say is that our youth have a right to have stories about their own experience, but these stories are powerful for others too. An example I would give is, I used to do a book club at my former library for adults, and it was mostly women, white women, upper middle class, that were free like 2 or 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday. And we read Angie's The Hate You Give. And it was so powerful that we actually like packed out a theater when it came, because half of those women had never read a story that featured a person of color as the prominent character. Half of these women in Midwest Iowa had never experienced police profiling or brutality or ever had a comfortable conversation about how we hold our public institutions accountable. So I need to remind us that these stories are essential and important to all of us. And anybody who would create a chilling effect by suggesting that they should be hidden or put on a back shelf or that we should create barriers to their access are antithetical to the power of storytelling for everybody, but it's also antithetical to what libraries are supposed to do, which is to add equity and inclusion to access so that you yourself can naturally, easily, without being judged in your own privacy, pursue knowledge and decide what you would like to do with it yourself.
Thank you so much. And let me just affirm that point. That's why, I open by saying every child deserves to see themselves, but also to be seen. And that's the root of these bans, is the fear. Not that a gay child will see him or herself or themselves, but that other people will read about them and have empathy for the human experience.
And can I just add, as a library practitioner, when Genderqueer became the most banned book in my state as the first openly non-binary president of the American Library Association, I had a lot to work through that, right? And just like Casey's point, but after you get beyond the feelings, at the end of the day, we're going to keep writing our stories, and we're going to defend a process by which you can check out a book and you can debate the ideas inside, because that is what we are all called to do.
I mean, librarians and educators have been absolutely heroic in this fight, truly. The people with the most power have said the least, and the people who should not have to be courageous in this moment have exhibited the most courage. So again, we just have to call that into the room. It's been both appalling and amazing to watch. Brian, PFLAG has been out front, both as advocates, but also challenging the legality of many of these bans. But this isn't just a legal or abstract fight. It's having real impacts on real communities. Can you tell us about some of the stories of the people who've been impacted by the bans that you're fighting for?
Sure. First, I'm not only speak for myself here, but one of the reasons this is so personal for me, I think I'm definitely the oldest person up on this stage. I never thought I would have to go through some things again in my life that I'm going through right now. I was telling Casey this story, I'll make it really quick. I was doing a campaign in Missouri, where I'm from, and I was in St. Louis, and I went into a bookstore and bought a book about a gay individual. I was 32 years old, I had never seen a book at that point, certainly none in my libraries back in the day. It was The Best Little Boy in the World by Andy Tobias. And I put that book, I had to drive back to Jeff City, I put the book in my trunk under the spare tire in case I was in a wreck, so nobody would find it. I got back to Jeff City. I read the book in one day, and my team in here knows I'm not a quick reader. I read it completely. I burned it in my fireplace so nobody would find it. That's why this is personal to me, and I've heard similar stories from other parents out there especially who want their kids to be able to see themselves. I did a call about a week ago. Had some incredible parents and allies and queer folks who were doing just amazing work in this space, literally on the front line of confronting this. We'll get into actions later, but it really for them was about showing up. Here in Texas, and I'll leave it very general, a librarian, the school went after her because she was trying to ensure, even with everything that's going on, that kids could see themselves and have a safe environment to do it. The school tried to get rid of her. The students rose up. She was able to stay. Then ultimately, when funding came around, they decided, oh, well, we'll just get rid of the librarian position. She is working at another school now. She is that champion out there. She is standing up for these kids. And whether it's showing up at a library or school board meeting or trying to figure out how to keep kids safe in school. That's what's going on out there. We are figuring ways around it, and I'm truly grateful to the librarians out there for everything you do.
Okay, so looking at the clock, I want to make sure to give the audience time to answer or to ask questions. So I just have one more question. There's educators in here, there are librarians, there are parents, students. Just each of you give kind of one practical or tangible step that people can do to join the fight against book bans.
Let me go. Okay. First, and again, if you are able, show up. These folks aren't as fierce as you think they are when you show up. And there aren't as many of them when we show up. And you don't necessarily have to lead. Become part of a coalition and just be there for them. Be that citizen that we all need to be right now, and be vigilant on when library boards or school boards are meeting. You know, and participate however best you feel you can. Join coalitions. We're getting ready to do some incredible work with the NAACP, connecting our chapters with their units to talk about these issues, how best to work in community together. And then I do have, sorry, I'm going to go ahead, jump ahead real quick here. I do have one big ask of you all. Right now, there is a new bill in the House of Representatives, the lovely Congress. I think it's, I'm going to have to look at it. It's 7661. So they're going to put up a screenshot here. I need you all to call your member of Congress and tell them that this book ban law is candidly bullshit. Okay? They're going after they're going to use funding, federal funding, to try to stop books that use the word transgenderism in any form and gender dysphoria. This is a tactic. This is mean-spirited, this is political, and I need you all to tell your members that have been supportive to oppose this. We sometimes forget that we need to provide a little affirmation to those that are standing up, especially those in challenging districts. So please, if you get time, you know, go, and those of you online, go on and call. We popped this yesterday, and I think we had over 1,000 PFlaggers call right away into the House of Representatives. They listen to those calls. It's important.
Just to speak specifically to educators for a second, as an author, like, we do a lot of keeping track of what's going on. PEN America is a great resource. They have a huge database of books that are most challenged and most banned. And I think they also have a great database of like step-by-step instructions for educators. But one of the things that they recommend that I think is great is knowing which books are most at risk. As an author, you definitely see the same books get picked up and circulated by the right-wing media, and then just baselessly challenged. And if you, as a teacher or an educator, are prepared to push back on those challenges, NCTE has a huge database of rationales for inclusion of books in your curriculum, and that way you're kind of locked and loaded with your response to whichever random person who's probably not even a parent in your district tries to challenge a book in your curriculum. Being prepared can be really, really powerful. And then also just keep an eye out on which marginalized authors are coming to school and library visits in your community, and support them. I mean, as an author, a queer and trans author coming into a public library visit, I honestly get scared sometimes. And to have like really friendly faces in the crowd, bring your kids, show them that this is like a cool community event that is a wonderful space to connect with empathetic individuals and storytellers. I can't tell you how bolstering that is as an author to see those faces looking back at you and know that there's so many people in that community that do have my back. So that's my take.
So to our teacher librarians, educators, media specialists, I would suggest power mapping your coalitions of support. And that's going to look unique to every journey. But looking at like your power caregivers who helped you build the, supportive reading list for the curriculum and wanted to make sure that stories about diverse perspectives were put into the school library meticulously, supported you. Often when I was called as the intellectual freedom chair of my state, it wasn't by teacher librarians or superintendents, it was by parents who were really appalled that this was happening in their community and didn't know how to reach out. And so when I talk about power mapping, I think it's important to remember that your retired factions can go in the middle of the day to these legislative hearings, your patrons and your parents and your caregivers, their voice sometimes will speak up in a way that yours is not equipped to do because of where you're positioned. And then just reminding yourself to ask for the help that you need. I think that a lot of folks who work in the public education space are a hustle hard, stay humble kind of a person. Does anybody relate to that? Show of hands, emphatic nods, yes. And I think this is the time to not only talk about the impact of the work we do and the correlative data to the success of our future and what we're doing every day, but to also remind folks that this will not continue to be the backbone of our society if we don't protect storytelling and shared learning. And so we need folks to get in the game.
Thank you. Okay, so just to remind you, if you have a question and you want to engage, you click on Engage on the event page, and you can submit your question. So the first question is that I'm going to ask is, I love this question. What would you say in response to decision makers who say kids don't need to see themselves in what they read, they just need to learn? I know y'all have some spicy answers to that.
I mean, I think, first of all, what I really want to say to those people is not going to get through to them, because I want to walk them through a lot of things that they are extremely opposed to even hearing. So what I would say to them more broadly, to try to appeal to some broad human nature, is I think this is in many ways the same argument as what is the value of the arts, and the value of the arts is teaching empathy and expression. And how is that not a crucial life skill for kids to have? I grew up in an environment where the chapter on evolution was taped shut in my science textbook at school. That's not a joke, that's real. And I used to always say, how do you guys expect me when I get to college to explain to people why I don't believe in evolution if I don't even know what it is? So if nothing else, at least these kids could know what's going on if they want to make their own decisions about it. Preventing children from having access to a knowledge does not prevent them from seeking it out themselves. It just makes them have a weird complex about it, and it just makes things way more high stakes for them and confusing, and they need to just have it accessible to them for empathy and expression.
I guess my question back would be, because I'm a librarian and sometimes you have to clarify the question, is, so you make sure you understand, is why would we want to have a representative democracy where folks do not see themselves as part of the process? Are we trying to disenfranchise large swaths of our community? Because when I think about great leaders, whether they're social or political or even religious, we communicate through story so that we can understand each other, because when there's understanding, then there's support. And so I really think about how vulnerable the learning process is, and I would not want to disenfranchise folks or confuse them about their seat at the table. And so obviously one begets the other. I can't really begin to fully participate and learn if I don't see myself in the space.
I was going to be a little snarky. I just find it fascinating that that the individual who may very well make that statement have no problems with other books or discussions being happened. It's politically driven. It's just totally, it's not about education, it's not about learning, it's not about growing, it's politically motivated, because they'll just flip the coin if they get the opportunity.
Well, my snarky answer is the people who ask that question have never not seen themselves in the story. Because anyone who has not seen themselves in the story already knows why this is necessary, but also for the educators out there, there's actually research on this. I haven't seen the research on queer children, but I assume it's the same. But for Black American children, the research is very clear that when they learn from an education that is reflective of their experiences and history, they actually do better in school and are more likely to graduate. And I can't imagine that's not true for any marginalized group. So there's actually, peer-reviewed research, scholarly research on this that you can cite. It's not just about feeling good. It is about academics. It is about ensuring student success. So that's actually an easy question to answer, except the people, I'm not saying this isn't a sincere question, but oftentimes the people who ask the question are not sincere, and so they don't actually want a real answer, but we can still give them the real answers. This one is for Sam. How are librarians navigating the tension between community pressure and professional ethics?
So I think part of it is making sure that you do have those communities of support. One of the ways that I keep myself sane is I have like thank you cards like in my glove compartment and at my desk and in my kitchen, so that I'm reaching out and sharing appreciation, because often in the brain, gratitude and fear cannot exist at the same time. And so I think finding your mechanisms, making sure you're hydrating and connecting with folks and seeing the impact and going to the author visits and celebrating the impact of the work that we're still doing is important. And then just educating the public and making sure that your own institutions are very aware that Article 4 of the Library Bill of Rights implores us as professionals to work with any organization or any group that would stymie any efforts to abridge or censor information. This is not political, this is professional. And so reminding ourselves of our why and our core values and making sure that we're having those conversations in our communities of practice, I think, are the way that we navigate those. And then just educating the public. It's very difficult, I think, for the general public to understand the civics and the like constitutional implications of meeting rooms and displays and you know, programming. And so holding a little bit of space to educate, I think, not only helps your community understand how to support you and your why, but it continues to remind you that, yeah, this is a narrow path, but it's always been difficult, and beloved, this is our moment in the crucible, and we will meet it. We will meet this moment.
I love this question as well. Can you give any queer book recommendations for me and my students? All of Casey's books, obviously.
I will give one, and then I want to hear from these two, because I really want to, I just want you guys to recommend books to me. I feel like, I mean, I'm going to shout out Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, which was the one I mentioned earlier that was very widely challenged last year. It's a book about a young gay girl in like 1950s San Francisco Chinatown. And it's just an incredible story, and it's so full of historical, like, history lessons, but in a delicious way that's around a love story and drag and bars and all of these wonderful things. So Last Night at the Telegraph Club.
I'm about to read that.
So I think it's always important too to remember to have like that robust of nonfiction support around our beautiful stories as well. And I was just going through the Austin Public Library, and they had this beautiful list of aromantic and asexual books that I would highly recommend to anybody here. So I would ask you to hit up the Austin Public Library, because obviously, as the librarian being asked about Reader's Advisory, of course I would blank while I'm on stage. But what I really loved about it was that it was reminding folks that there is a lot of peer-reviewed scholarship about this, and that there is an abundance of literature that's coming out that I really wish it had existed when I was a teenager finding my way. And I really love when we explore gender expression as well as romantic expression, because more conversations about that spectrum, those spectrums, I think, in public, will remind folks of the nuance of love and navigating the world around us.
Anything? No? Okay, moving on. No? Okay. Let's see. Historically, attempts to censor books have sometimes made those books more visible. Do you see that dynamic happening with LGBTQ plus literature today?
I have a story. So in my home community, This Book is Gay was not as popular, you know, like maybe in 2025 as it had been several years ago when it was first published, and parents got a hold of it and they decided for the first time in years that they wanted to challenge a book in my school district. They had to go like dust off the process because it had been so long, so they're like blowing dust off this policy, and they're like, how do we reconsider a book? And when you reconsider a book, you have to take it in its entirety. You have to assemble a committee. You have to read the book and then determine, is this good for us to have? Should we move it? Should we add a label? And my community reverse uno'd, folks. Not only did they say that the book needed to stay on the shelf, but all those extra copies really needed to go into every library in the district because it was so good. And that, my friends, is called the Streisand effect.
Okay, so we are out of time, but I'm going to ask this one last question because I feel like this audience needs this. I won't be answering, though. What keeps you hopeful?
again, I think age gives me some liberty here of what I've seen or not seen happen out there. I see parents, students, educators, average folks standing up every day. And that's what gives me hope. And you know, we have chapters in places like Rome, Georgia. That's the home of Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're out there every day doing the work. And so I still believe in the greater good, and that we can find that good in just enough people to make a difference.
I think it, for me, is that this is part of the conversation. Do you believe that a couple years ago folks were asking if libraries were relevant? Blech. I think we've really put that question to bed. And so I would recommend going and looking at uniteagainstbookbans.org, which is the largest coalition of folks against abridgment and censorship in this hemisphere. And then if you haven't hopped onto PBS recently, I would really recommend a beautiful documentary called The Librarians if you're looking for folks that are hopeful.
I think young people keep me hopeful. Like I said, I mean, I interact with a lot of my younger readers, and they are so plugged in. They are locked in. They are reading, and that excites me so much because there's this kind of prevailing narrative in the media that our kids are not reading. And there are so many kids that are. And I mean, today before this, I was interviewed by 2 local high school students who gave me one of the best interviews of my career. And they were so smart and so brilliant and so checked in. And there are so many young readers like that. And I'm doing it for them. I love them, and they keep me hopeful.
Beautiful. Well, this session is coming to a close. Let me just send you with your marching orders that the time for sitting on the sidelines is over. If you value everyone in your community, if you value the freedom to read and the freedom to learn, then you have to do something. So please go out and do something, because the other side is winning, but there are not more of them than there are of us. They're just more organized. Thank you, Brian, Sam, Casey. Let's please show our appreciation.
Thank you.